The check engine light had been on for 3 weeks. Nick had been ignoring it, hoping whatever was wrong would just go away. That's how he dealt with most problems lately. Pretend they don't exist until they explode in his face. The explosion came at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday, halfway between the warehouse and Shelley. His 2004 Honda Civic sputtered, coughed, and died on the highway shoulder. Cars whipped past at 70 miles per hour, rocking his dead vehicle with their wake. Nick gripped the steering wheel and felt his chest tighten. Not now. Please, not now. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen, the babysitter. Nick, it's almost 6:30. You said you'd be here by 6. I know. I'm so sorry. My car broke down. I'm coming, I have a dinner appointment at 7. I told you this morning. I know, I remember. I'll be there, 20 minutes, I promise. That's what you said at 6. I'll have to charge you the late fee. $40. $40 he didn't have. Okay, yes. I'm sorry. I'm coming. He ended the call and stared at his phone screen. The wallpaper was a photo of Mia, his 11-month-old daughter, grinning with her 2 front teeth showing. Her dark eyes, his eyes, sparkled with innocent joy. His hands were shaking. The second call came immediately. Rick, the manager at Mario's Pizzeria. Nick, hey man, I know you're off tonight, but we just got a delivery request, and the guy specifically asked for you by name. Said he'd tip well. You interested? Nick closed his eyes. He was exhausted. Bone deep. Haven't slept more than 4 hours in a week. Exhausted. His body ached from 8 hours loading trucks at the warehouse. All he wanted was to pick up Mia, go home, and collapse. But $40 late fee. Plus rent was due Friday, 3 days away, and he was $580 short. Yeah, he heard himself say. Yeah, I'll take it. Great. Address is on State Street in Shelley. 3 large pizzas. Guy's name is Morrison. Morrison. Nick didn't recognize the name. Okay. I'll be there in an hour. You're the best, man. Nick sat in his dead car, breathing slowly, fighting the panic rising in his throat. For the first time in 5 years, 11 months, and 27 days, he thought about using. Just 1 pill, 1 oxy. It would make all this go away. The fear, the exhaustion, the crushing weight of trying to survive when survival seemed impossible. He could feel it, that familiar pull, the whisper that had nearly killed him 100 times before. His sponsor's voice echoed in his head. When you want to use, play the tape forward. Where does that 1 pill lead? Nick knew exactly where it led. Back to the streets, back to losing everything, losing Mia. He looked at her photo again. Her smile, her trust. Not today, he whispered. Not ever again. He pulled out his credit card maxed except for about $150 and called a tow truck. The morning had started the same way every morning started, with Mia crying at 4 a.m. Nick dragged himself out of bed, every muscle protesting. 2 hours of sleep, maybe 3 if he was lucky. He'd been up late, doing intake paperwork for J&M Mental Health, where he volunteered as a peer support specialist. The apartment was freezing. He was 2 weeks behind on the heating bill, and they'd sent a warning. Pay by Friday, or service gets shut off. Add it to the list. He shuffled to Mia's room. She was standing in her crib, tears streaming down her chubby cheeks, hands reaching for him. Hey, baby girl, Daddy's here. He picked her up, felt her immediately calm against his chest. This moment, this simple moment of being needed, being her whole world, made everything worth it. He changed her diaper. 5 left in the package. He needed to buy more, but diapers cost $32 for a box that lasted maybe a week if he was careful. And formula was running low too, another $28. The mental math never stopped. Gas or diapers? Formula or electricity? Food or rent? Always robbing Peter to pay Paul. Never quite catching up. He fed Mia her bottle, watching her eyes get heavy. She fell back asleep in his arms. He held her for 5 minutes longer than he should have, knowing he needed to get ready for work, but unable to let her go. These moments were all he had. At 4:45 a.m., he bundled her into her car seat and drove to Mrs. Chen's house. The babysitter met him at the door in her bathrobe. $35 today, she said. No warmth. Just business. Yes, ma'am. He'd pay her Friday when he got his warehouse check. Another $175 that was already spent before he earned it. He kissed Mia's forehead. Love you, baby. Be good for Mrs. Chen. Mia just blinked at him, half asleep. He drove to the warehouse in darkness. The streets empty except for other people working jobs that started before dawn. The warehouse was a massive distribution center for a national hardware chain. Nick's job was simple. Load trucks, 40-pound boxes, 8 hours a day, $16 an hour. His coworkers were good guys. They talked about football, their wives, weekend plans, normal life stuff. Nick mostly listened, did his work, tried to be invisible. During his lunch break, he'd skipped lunch to save the $7 it would cost. He sat in his car and looked at his bank account. $47.23. Rent was $620. Due Friday. He'd get $175 from the warehouse on Friday. Maybe another $80 from Mario's if he did enough deliveries this week. Still $380 short. He'd been praying for a miracle. Some unexpected money, a canceled bill, anything. Nothing came. His phone buzzed. Text from his landlord. Rent due Friday, or eviction process starts Monday. Nick put his head against the steering wheel. The craving hit again, stronger this time. One pill would erase this feeling. This crushing, suffocating feeling of drowning. He grabbed his phone, texted his sponsor, having a rough day. The response came immediately. You've got this. 5 years, brother. Don't throw it away. 5 years? 11 months? 27 days. He'd come too far. He went back to work. After his shift ended at 2 p.m., Nick drove straight to J&M Mental Health. He'd been volunteering there for 8 months, doing peer support for people in recovery. It didn't pay anything, but it mattered. Maybe it was the only thing that mattered besides Mia. Today he was meeting with Tyler, a 19-year-old kid who'd been in and out of treatment 3 times. Heroin. Same age Nick had been when he started using. Tyler looked rough, thin, pale, shadows under his eyes. I don't know if I can do this, man, Tyler said, slumped in his chair. I keep trying and I keep failing. Nick sat across from him. How long you been clean this time? 18 days. That's 18 days your body is healing. 18 days you didn't die. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing. I feel like nothing. Nick leaned forward. I've been where you are. Exactly where you are. I know it feels impossible right now, but it gets better, I promise. You just have to keep showing up. Tyler looked at him with desperate eyes. You really believe that? Nick thought about his own life. The broken car, the empty bank account, the constant fear. He was barely surviving, but he was alive. He had Mia. He was clean. Yeah, he said. I really believe that. After the session, Tyler thanked him. Nick watched him leave, hoping those words would be enough, hoping Tyler wouldn't be another statistic, another overdose, another life lost. Nick's phone buzzed. Where are you? It's 6. His heart stopped. He'd lost track of time. That's when the car died. The tow truck cost $85. The Uber to Mario's Pizzeria cost $23. By the time Nick walked into the restaurant at 7:45 p.m., he had $24 left in his account and a stress headache that made his vision blur. Rick handed him the pizzas. 3 large. Address is 2847 State Street in Shelley. Guy sounded older. Nice. Said to take your time. Nick took the pizzas and drove the delivery car toward Shelley. His own car was at a mechanic shop with a $400 repair estimate he had no way to pay. The address led to a nice house, single-story ranch style, well-maintained. Christmas lights strung along the roof even though it was late February. Nick checked the order ticket. Total, $42.50. He rang the doorbell, expecting a quick handoff. Get the money, get back, Pick up Mia, go home, figure out tomorrow. The door opened. An elderly man stood there, maybe 75, with kind eyes and gray hair. He wore a cardigan and slippers. "Nick," he said, smiling. Come in. You're right on time." Nick blinked, confused. "I'm actually late, sir. I apologize. That'll be $42.50. "Nonsense. Come inside. It's cold out there." "Sir, I really shouldn't. Please, just for a moment. I want to talk to you." Something in the man's voice made Nick hesitate. Not threatening, but urgent? Important? Against policy. Against his better judgment. Nick stepped inside. The house was warm, decorated simply but comfortably. The old man led him to the living room, gesturing to a chair. "Please, sit. Can I get you some water?" Okay." Nick sat, still holding the pizza boxes, completely confused. The man brought him water and sat across from him, studying his face. "Do you remember me, Nick?" Nick looked at him carefully. The face was familiar in a way he couldn't place. "I'm sorry. I don't think so." The old man smiled sadly. "It was 7 years ago. Corner of 5th and Main, downtown Idaho Falls. February. Cold night, maybe 15 degrees. Nick's blood went cold. Downtown Idaho Falls. February. 7 years ago. That was the worst period of his life. The period he tried not to think about. When he was living on the streets, strung out, dying slowly. You were sitting outside the old Walgreens." The man continued. "I walked up to you and asked if you had any change for food. A flash of memory. Sitting on cardboard, shivering. People walking past, like he didn't exist. You were wearing a torn jacket," the man said. "You looked like you hadn't eaten in days yourself." The memory crystallized. That night, that freezing night, Nick was 24 years old, and certain he'd be dead within a month. He'd been on the streets for 3 months. Before that, he'd been bouncing between shelters and his dealer's couch, but winter made everything harder. The shelters were full. His dealer had kicked him out for stealing. He had nowhere. So he sat outside the old Walgreens on 5th and Main, a piece of cardboard under him, trying to block the wind that cut through his jacket, a torn thing he'd found in a dumpster. He hadn't eaten in 36 hours. He'd spent his last bit of money on pills 2 days ago, and now he was sick, withdrawing, shaking. His stomach cramped and his skin felt like it was crawling. But he had $4.37 in his pocket. He'd panhandled it that afternoon, enough for one more fix. Just enough to stop feeling sick for a few hours. He was waiting for his dealer to text him back. That's when the old man appeared, well-dressed, expensive coat, but his face looked broken, lost. "Excuse me, young man," the man said quietly. "Do you have any spare change?" I haven't eaten today." Nick stared at him. A well-dressed old man asking him, a homeless junkie, for money? But he saw something in the man's eyes. Genuine desperation. The same desperation Nick felt every day. Something in Nick's heart, some tiny piece that hadn't died yet, responded. He pulled out his $4.37. All the money in the world to him. His next fix? His relief from the sickness. "Here," he said, holding it out. "Take it. There's a McDonald's 2 blocks down." The old man stared at the crumpled bills and coins. "But you need this more than I do. You asked for help. I'm helping. Go eat." The man took the money with shaking hands. "What's your name?" Nick almost didn't answer. What did his name matter? He was nobody. He'd be dead soon anyway. Nick Peterson. The old man's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Nick. I won't forget this." He walked away. Nick sat there in the cold, empty-handed, wondering if he'd just made the stupidest decision of his life. His dealer never texted back that night. Nick went through withdrawal alone on that cardboard, shaking and sick, nothing to ease the pain. But somehow he survived. "That was you?" Nick whispered, staring at the old man in front of him. The man nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "That was me. My name is Frank Morrison." Nick couldn't breathe. "I don't. I don't understand. Frank leaned forward. I need to tell you something, Nick. That night, that February night, I wasn't just hungry. I was planning to kill myself. The words hung in the air. I'd lost everything. Frank continued. My business, my savings. My wife had died 3 years earlier. I had nothing left. No family, no purpose. I walked downtown that night with a plan to end it all. Nick listened, unable to speak. But I made a decision first, Frank said. I would test humanity one last time. If one person, just one, showed me kindness, I'd reconsider. I'd try to keep living. He smiled through his tears. You were the first person I saw. A young man who clearly had nothing, sitting on cardboard in the freezing cold. I asked you for change, and you gave me everything you had. It was only $4.37, Nick managed. It was everything. It wasn't about the money, Nick. It was about being seen, being valued as a human being. You were broken and suffering, and you still chose kindness. You saved my life that night. Nick felt tears running down his face. I was high. I was dying. I was nobody. You were everything I needed to see. One act of kindness from someone who had every reason to be cruel. I went to McDonald's. I ate, I cried, and I decided to live. They sat in silence for a moment. What happened to you? Nick asked quietly. Frank smiled. I rebuilt. It took time. I worked odd jobs, saved money, started over. 2 years ago, I opened a small business. Mario's Pizzeria. Nick's eyes widened. You're the owner? I bought that franchise specifically in this area, hoping I might find you someday, hoping I could thank you. When you applied for the delivery driver position 6 months ago, and I saw your name, Nick Peterson, I couldn't believe it. But Rick is the manager. I've never seen you there. I stay behind the scenes mostly. But I've been watching you, Nick. Watching you work 2 jobs, raise your daughter alone, volunteer helping other addicts. I see who you are. Nick shook his head. I'm barely surviving. My car broke down tonight. I'm about to be evicted. I'm failing at everything. You're not failing. You're fighting. And I've seen enough to know you're extraordinary. Frank stood up. Come with me. I need to show you something. He led Nick to the dining room table. 3 wrapped boxes sat there, along with 2 envelopes. What is this? Nick asked. Frank picked up the first envelope. 7 years ago, you gave me $4.37. You gave me your last dollar and saved my life. Tonight, it's my turn. He handed Nick the envelope. Nick opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a check for $7,000. Your rent, Frank said. For the next year. I called your landlord. It's taken care of. Nick stared at the check. $7,000. A year of rent. A year of not worrying about eviction. About where Mia would sleep. About losing the one stable thing in his life. Frank, I can't. You can. You will. Frank's voice was firm but kind. You're 3 days from eviction. Now you're not. This is done. Nick couldn't speak. The number on the check blurred through his tears. Frank handed him the second envelope, a Best Buy gift card. $1,000. Rick told me you've been talking about going back to school. Social work degree, counseling focus. You'll need a laptop, books, supplies. How did you know? I listen. I pay attention. You're going to be amazing at this, Nick. You already are. The third gift was a Fred Meyer gift card. Another $1,000. For Mia, Frank said softly. Diapers, formula, clothes, whatever she needs. You shouldn't have to choose between feeding your daughter and feeding yourself. Nick sat down hard in one of the dining room chairs. The boxes, the envelopes, the check, it was too much. Too overwhelming. He put his face in his hands and sobbed. Frank sat beside him, quiet, letting him release years of pressure and fear and exhaustion. There are so many people who need this more than I do, Nick finally said. But I owe you, not them, you. Frank put a hand on Nick's shoulder. That night, I was going to die. You showed me that kindness still existed in this world. That people still cared. You gave me everything when you had nothing. That's who you are, Nick. That's why you deserve this." They sat together in silence. "Can I tell you what happened to me?" Nick asked quietly. "After that night?" "Please." And Nick told him everything. "My parents died when I was 18. Nick began. "Car accident. Drunk driver. I was a senior in high school. They were both teachers in Pocatello. Good people. Loving. And then they were just gone." Frank listened without interrupting. "I went to live with my Aunt Linda in Idaho Falls. She tried, but she was working 2 jobs. No time for a grieving teenager. I graduated high school by a thread. No college plans. No money. No direction." Nick stared at his hands. "I got a job at a gas station. Met a coworker named Travis who introduced me to pills. OxyContin, just to take the edge off," he said. "The first time I took one, all the pain of losing my parents just disappeared. Within 6 months, I was addicted. I lost my job, started stealing. Aunt Linda kicked me out. I was 19 years old and living on the streets. The next 5 years were hell. I was in and out of shelters, in and out of jail. I got arrested for shoplifting, trespassing, possession, court-ordered rehab that didn't work because I didn't want it to work." Frank's eyes were full of compassion. "In 2018, I met a girl named Sarah at an NA meeting. She was 6 months sober, beautiful, kind. We connected. I thought love would save me." Nick laughed bitterly. "It didn't. We moved in together. Both got jobs. For a year, things were good. Then I relapsed. Hard. Sarah got pregnant, our daughter Mia. Sarah stayed clean through her pregnancy, but I kept using. By the time Mia was born in September 2018, I was disappearing for days at a time. Sarah gave me an ultimatum. Get clean or she was gone. I tried. I failed. I tried again. Failed again. December 2018, when Mia was 3 months old, I came home from a 3-day binge and found a note. Sarah had left, packed her bags, and abandoned our baby with me. The note said, "I can't do this anymore. She deserves better than both of us. You figure it out." Nick's voice broke. I was holding this tiny, screaming baby. I was high. I was alone. I had no idea how to be a father. And I realized, if I don't get clean right now, we both die. That was my rock bottom, the 14th of December 2018. I called the Wood Pilot Program Drug Court. I entered treatment. Mia stayed with foster care for 4 months while I completed residential rehab. Hardest 4 months of my life, being separated from her. But I got clean. I got her back in April 2019. Been sober ever since. 5 years, 11 months, 27 days. Frank was crying now too. "But it's been hard," Nick continued. "I work at the warehouse, 40 hours a week, $16 an hour. I deliver pizzas for you at night. I volunteer at J&M Mental Health because those kids need someone who understands. And I'm raising Mia alone. Sarah never came back. I don't even know where she is. I'm barely making it, Frank. Tonight, before my car died, I thought about using, for the first time in almost 6 years, just for a second, just to make it all stop hurting. But then I thought about Mia, about losing her, and I couldn't." Frank reached out and pulled Nick into a hug. They held each other, 2 broken men who'd found each other at their darkest moments. "You're not alone anymore," Frank whispered. "Not if you don't want to be." When they pulled apart, Frank's eyes were serious. "I don't have children, Nick. My wife and I couldn't have them. We made peace with it, but then she died, and I thought I'd die alone. No family, no legacy." He paused. "Would you let me be part of your life? And Mia's? I know it's a lot to ask, but—" "Yes," Nick said immediately. "God, yes, we'd be honored." Frank smiled a real, genuine smile of pure joy. "Then let's do this right. Let's build something together." The next morning, Nick showed up at Mario's Pizzeria at 10 a.m. Frank was there, in the office, reviewing invoices. "I wanted to thank you properly," Nick said from the doorway. Frank looked up and smiled. "Come in." Close the door. Nick sat across from him. I meant what I said last night, Frank began. I want to help you build a real future. So here's what I'm proposing. Quit the warehouse job. Work here full-time. $18 an hour. Plus tips, health insurance, flexible schedule around Mia. Nick's eyes widened. Frank, let me finish. I'll work your schedule around your school classes. You start that social work program at Idaho State, online. Focus on your degree. Focus on Mia. I'll handle the rest. Why would you do all this? Frank leaned back in his chair. Because 7 years ago, you gave me a reason to live. Now let me give you a reason to thrive. They shook hands. Then Frank stood up and hugged him. Welcome to the family, son. Nick's life transformed in ways he couldn't have imagined. He quit the warehouse, started working full-time at Mario's with a schedule built around Mia's needs. Frank paid him fairly, gave him benefits, treated him like family. He enrolled at Idaho State University in their online social work program. The Best Buy gift card bought him a laptop and books. He studied during Mia's naps, late at night after she went to bed. But the biggest change was Frank. Frank became Grandpa Frank to Mia. He'd show up at Nick's apartment twice a week with dinner, home-cooked meals that Nick hadn't had since his parents died. He'd play with Mia, teaching her to stack blocks and make funny faces. When Nick had exams, Frank would babysit. When Mia was sick, Frank would bring medicine and children's books. For the first time since he was 18 years old, Nick had family. Thanksgiving that year, the three of them sat around Frank's dining room table. Nick had cooked turkey for the first time in his life. It was dry and overcooked, but they ate it anyway and laughed. I'm thankful for you both, Frank said, holding Mia on his lap. You've given this old man a reason to wake up every morning. Nick looked at them, this little girl and this old man who'd chosen each other, and felt his throat tighten. I'm thankful you remembered, he said quietly. Christmas was magical. Frank bought Mia a wooden dollhouse he'd built himself in his garage, complete with hand-carved furniture. Nick gave Frank a framed photo, the three of them at Mario's, covered in flour from making pizza dough, all of them laughing. The inscription read, Family isn't blood. It's who shows up. Thank you for showing up. Frank cried when he opened it. The graduation ceremony was held at Idaho State's Pocatello campus. Nick walked across the stage in his cap and gown, accepting his bachelor's degree in social work. In the audience, Frank held 3-year-old Mia on his lap. When Nick's name was called, Mia shrieked at the top of her lungs, That's my daddy! The whole auditorium laughed. Frank was beaming with pride, tears streaming down his face. After the ceremony, they went to dinner at a nice restaurant. Mia insisted on wearing her fancy dress, and Frank wore a suit. I'm so proud of you, Frank said, raising his glass of wine. 4 years ago, you were barely surviving. Now look at you, a college graduate, an amazing father, a person who's changing lives. Nick smiled. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. As they ate, Nick brought up something he'd been thinking about for months. Frank, I want to do more. J&M mental health is great, but there are so many people falling through the cracks. People who need residential treatment but can't afford it. People who need job training, life skills, real support. What are you thinking? A recovery center, 20 beds, residential treatment, peer support groups, job training programs. Everything I wish I'd had when I was trying to get clean. Nick pulled out a folder, a full business plan he'd been working on for his senior capstone project. Frank read through it carefully. The budget, the staffing plan, the treatment model, the partnerships with local businesses for job placement. This is extraordinary, Frank said finally. How much would it cost to start? At least $500,000. I know it's impossible, but what if it wasn't impossible? Frank interrupted. What if we did this together? Nick stared at him. Frank, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Frank closed the folder. I'm 78 years old, Nick. I have more money than I'll ever need and no one to leave it to. Except you and Mia. Let me do this. Let's build something that will outlive both of us. They talked for hours. Frank would provide the funding and business expertise. Nick would design the programs and run the day-to-day operations. They shook hands across the table. Then Frank said something that made Nick's eyes fill with tears. "I never got to be a father. Never got to help my son build something meaningful. This is my second chance. Thank you for giving me that." "Thank you for being my dad," Nick whispered. Peterson Recovery Center opened its doors on a sunny October morning. The building had been an old elementary school that Frank purchased and renovated. 20 beds, common areas, counseling offices, a commercial kitchen where residents would learn job skills. The treatment model was holistic, addressing addiction, mental health, job training, life skills, family relationships, everything Nick had learned from his own recovery, combined with his social work education. They'd hired a small staff, 2 licensed counselors, a nurse, a case manager, and several peer support specialists. On opening day, Nick stood in the lobby with Frank, looking at the plaque on the wall. Peterson Recovery Center, founded 2024 inches, honor of the kindness that changes lives. "We're going to help a lot of people here," Frank said quietly. Before Nick could respond, someone walked through the door. Tyler. Nick hadn't seen him in over 2 years. The 19-year-old kid he talked to at J&M Mental Health that exhausting day when his car broke down. But Tyler looked different. Healthy, clean, confident. "Nick?" Tyler said, smiling. "I heard about this place. I had to come see it." "Tyler, how are you?" 2 years sober," Tyler said proudly. "Been working, going to community college. You were right, man. It did get better." They hugged. "What are you doing here?" Nick asked. Tyler looked around the center. "I want to help, like you helped me. I want to volunteer, do peer support, give back." Nick felt his throat tighten. "We'd love to have you." Within 6 months, Tyler was certified as a peer support specialist and joined the staff full-time. He had a gift for connecting with the younger clients, understanding their struggles in ways that formal training couldn't teach. In the first year, Peterson Recovery Center served 127 people. 43 of them achieved long-term recovery over a year sober. Every success was celebrated. Every relapse was met with compassion and another chance. Nick still worked at Mario's 1 or 2 nights a week, delivering pizzas. It kept him humble, kept him connected to where he'd been. Frank made Nick a 50% partner in the pizzeria. "For Mia's college fund," he said. Nick was driving home from Peterson Recovery Center one evening when he saw her, a young woman, maybe 23, sitting outside a gas station. Thin, dirty clothes, that hollow look in her eyes that Nick recognized immediately. He pulled over. "Hey," he called out. "You hungry?" She looked at him suspiciously. "Why?" "Because I've been where you are. Come on, I'll buy you something to eat." They went to McDonald's. Nick bought her a meal, and they sat in a booth. "My name's Nick. I run a recovery center in Idaho Falls. I'm an addict in recovery. Been clean almost 7 years." She ate slowly, studying him. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone helped me when I needed it most. Someone showed me that I mattered. Now I'm passing it on." He told her about Peterson Recovery Center, about the treatment they offered, the support, the chance to rebuild. "We have a bed available right now, if you want it." She started crying. "I don't have any money. We have scholarships. We have payment plans. We have options. If you want help, we'll figure it out." He gave her his card. "Call anytime. Ask for Nick or Tyler. We'll be there." "Why?" she asked again. "Why do you care?" Nick thought about $4.37. About Frank Morrison. About a freezing night 7 years ago when a stranger remembered his name. "Because kindness is never wasted," he said. "It just takes time to bloom." Mia was 6 years old now, in 1st grade. Smart, kind, full of questions about everything. She called Frank Grandpa, naturally, without hesitation. He was at their apartment every Sunday for dinner, teaching her to play chess, even though she mostly just liked moving the pieces around. Peterson Recovery Center had expanded to 35 beds. They'd added a women's wing, specialized programming for mothers in recovery, daycare services so women could bring their children. Tyler was now assistant director, running the day-to-day operations alongside Nick. Frank was chairman of the board, semi-retired but still showing up every week to check on things. Nick owned 50% of Mario's Pizzeria. The business was thriving, but more importantly, he had a family. One Sunday evening, they were all at Frank's house for dinner. Nick was cooking. He'd gotten better over the years, under Frank's patient instruction. Mia was setting the table, very seriously, making sure every fork was in the right place. Tyler had joined them, as he often did. He'd become like a younger brother to Nick. "Grandpa," Mia said as they sat down to eat, "tell the story again." "Which story, sweetheart?" "About when you met Daddy." Frank smiled at Nick. They'd told her a simplified version about two people who helped each other when they both needed it most. "Well," Frank began, "it was a very cold night, and I met a young man who taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned." "What lesson?" Mia asked, even though she'd heard this 100 times. "That kindness is never wasted," Nick and Frank said together. After dinner, after Mia had been put to bed in Frank's guest room, the three men sat in the living room. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Frank said. "That night, 7 years ago, I was going to die. I was certain my life was over." "And now?" Nick asked. Frank looked around at them, his family, chosen and built on kindness. "Now I can't imagine a more perfect life. I have a son who makes me proud every single day, a granddaughter who fills my heart with joy, and a legacy that will help people long after I'm gone." He raised his glass to $4.37, and everything it became. They clinked glasses. Tyler looked confused. "What's the $4.37? Nick and Frank exchanged a smile. "The amount that changed everything," Nick said. "Remind me to tell you the full story sometime." The photo hangs in the main office of Peterson Recovery Center. 4 people standing in front of the building on opening day. Frank, Nick, Tyler, and little Mia in her junior manager apron from Mario's. They're all smiling. A family built not on blood, but on kindness, second chances, and showing up when it matters most. Beside the photo is a plaque that reads, "Founded on $4.37 and the belief that everyone deserves a second chance. February 2017. Present. In memory of the kindness that started it all." New clients ask about the $4.37. Staff members tell them the story about a homeless addict who gave his last dollar to a suicidal stranger, about how that stranger remembered and came back 7 years later to return the kindness 1,000 times over, about how one small act of compassion created ripples that saved hundreds of lives. Nick tells his clients at Peterson Recovery Center, "You matter. Your life has value. We'll help you find your way." Because that's what Frank taught him. Everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves kindness. Mia is learning it too. Last week, she gave her lunch to a kid at school who forgot theirs. Nick asked her why. "Because Grandpa Frank says we help people when they need it," she said simply. She's 6 years old and already understands what took Nick decades to learn. Kindness multiplies. $4.37 became Peterson Recovery Center, became Tyler's recovery and new career, became Mia's future, became proof that one act of kindness can change the world. Every person who walks through Peterson Recovery Center's doors is another chance for kindness to bloom. Every person who gets sober is another ripple spreading outward. Every family reunited is another miracle born from $4.37 and an old man who remembered a name. Nick is 7 years sober now. He has a daughter who knows she's loved, a father who chose him, a brother in Tyler, and a mission to be for others what Frank was for him. Frank says Nick saved his life that February night in 2017, but Nick knows the truth. They saved each other, and together they're saving others. That's the legacy of $4.37. That's what happens when kindness meets kindness, when brokenness meets compassion, when someone remembers, someone shows up, someone says, "You matter." 7 years ago, Nick was dying on the streets of Idaho Falls. Now he's living a life he never thought possible. Because of $4.37. Because Frank Morrison remembered. Because kindness is never wasted. It just takes time to bloom. And when it does, it changes everything.